Like you've been in all the classrooms before
Oh,
you go.
wow.
You got to sign that huge poster
This is
because I'm
good.
going to frame it.
Looks like a very intelligent group of people.
They are.
I
And they're
know.
humble, but they do, like Paul does this really cool thing on holistic health education.
Oh, holistic health education.
And she is doing one on
I think very
sustainability.
holistically.
I know you do. And Donna Van Ritt, the Black Bear, works for the EDD, Educational Development. I used to work Thank you so much and welcome. On behalf of President Bean, John F. Kennedy University, Judy Castro, and the project director of the HSI grant and the Undergraduate Success Center team, thank you for joining us today for today's Latino Speaker Series event featuring Rick Najera. The Latino Speaker Series is made possible by the U.S. Department of Education Title V Hispanic Serving Institution Grant awarded to JFK University in October of 2015. The Undergraduate Success Center, under the leadership of Dr. Castro, is one of the HSI grant outcomes. The Latino Speaker Series was established within the grant to bring recognized experts in diversity and serving Latino and underrepresented individuals to JFK for the purpose of sharing their insights and experience with the university and our community. And we're thrilled that you're here to join us today. We value this opportunity to expand awareness of the Latino culture as a prime component of our work within the HSI grant. It's our pleasure today to share Rick Najera's successes in reframing the mainstream understanding of Latino culture. You just saw Rick uses comedy to dissolve Latino stereotypes, and his work spans TV, movies, and the Broadway stage. Rick's a comedian, a screenwriter, an actor, a director, a speaker, and an author. The LA Times places him in the top 13 in diversity, and Variety deems him as one of the 50 most creatives in Hollywood. His expansive portfolio credits include starring in films with George Clooney, writing sketches for Jamie Foxx and Jim Carrey. You probably just saw him in his Latino Logs Broadway production that he both directed and starred in, and it was directed by Cheech Marin. And Rick will go on and talk more about the CBS Comedy Diversity Showcase that he has run at CBS for the past 13 years. Rick is well known for his writing on Mad TV, in Living Color, and in Hulu's Emmy-nominated original series East Los High. And you also saw that his recent book, Almost White, is now on the Amazon bestsellers list. Rick is also a national motivational speaker and coach, having presented at Google, the World Bank, Harvard, Stanford, and UCLA. We're thrilled to add JFKU to that distinguished list. It's my honor to introduce Rick Najera and his presentation, Latinos Are the Solution, Not the Problem, a discussion on race and diversity in America. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me here. I got tired just hearing my credits. It was exhausting. I'm much more casual than most people realize, and I speak at a lot of different places. But I thought today would be particularly amazing because my eyes are just burning, and I've been sneezing and sniffling. I'm like, why is that? And I said, oh, there's fires here. And being in shallow Hollywood, a lot of times we get wrapped up in our own world, so we don't even know tragedies happening all around us, and all these different things are happening. So just to know that I feel for what's going to this community and what you guys all must be going through. I grew up in San Diego, so we had Santa Ana fires all the time, and it was part of our life. So I'll try to make this as humorous as possible because I think you need a laugh. But I also want to make it real, because when we're talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, normally what happens is I'm cryogenically frozen for the rest of those months. But Hispanic Heritage Month, they unfreeze me, they bring me out and have me speak to the rest of the world about Latinos. Now, I've been Latino for the last 3 years. No, I'm joking. I've been Latino all my life. I didn't realize I was Latino. I'll tell you a quick story. I told my mom when I was growing up, hey, there's these Mexican kids live down the street from me. They live on a chicken ranch. And it was such an amazing Mexican family, because I said, wow, I saw a chicken walk through their front yard, walk into the front room, and walk out the door. I go, that is really Mexican. And my mom looked at me, she goes, you don't have to play with the Mexican kids down the street. You are Mexican, so you can stay home and play with yourself. Actual words my mom said. And to understand Latinos, you understand we use a lot of comedy and humor in our works, because no matter what happens, no matter what the situation is, how bad it is, how terrible it is, there's always a joke that goes with it. It's really amazing. Even during the last earthquake that hit Mexico City, a rock star got killed, and someone said he died of a concrete overdose. That's how they dealt with it. They deal with comedy and humor. And growing up, I really started looking at comedy and humor because I wasn't pure Mexican, like you would imagine. I didn't look quite Mexican. When I saw Mexicans on camera, they looked not like me. First of all, I'm güero. You have to understand the term güero. Güero means tall, good-looking, light-skinned Mexican male. This is what my people call me. I didn't say it myself, but my people did come up with that term, güero. My sister, she's very dark, though. My sister's extremely dark, because in Mexican families, we have different skin colors that come among us. In fact, early in California history, a lot of people thought that Latinos were very promiscuous, because they'd see one kid that was light and one kid that was dark, and they assume it's two different fathers. Not the case. My sister's very dark, and I used to joke about this, because I said, my sister's dark, I'm very light. I have a lot of Spanish blood in me. She has a lot of Indian blood in her. I know that because growing up, I made her build me beautiful Spanish missions in my backyard. I stole her gold and gave her chicken pox and measles. Now, that is a historical joke, if you understand it, because that's the Mexican experience. We deal with the indigenous side of us, and we deal with the Spanish side, European side. Then again, we also deal with Caribbean. We deal with African side and the Taino side, or the Caribbean native side, mixed with the European side. So we're a very mixed culture. We're extremely mixed. We somehow have no problem mixing with other cultures, and that's part of our strength and our diversity. First of all, not every single Latino is Mexican. That's a fallacy. Not everyone is Mexican. There are different kinds of Mexicans. Peruvian Mexicans, Puerto Rican Mexicans, Cuban Mexicans. That's a joke again for you. Okay. So the truth is, we're coming every size, shape, and color. And even growing up, I wanted to talk about my life, because I started thinking about it. I could tell you everything about there is about Mexican history and things like that, because I did take Chicano studies. I did study it. And the pressure on me to get a good grade in Chicano studies was amazing. I mean, the professor knew who I was. So I'd be in class, and this happened recently, because I went back to school. People were surprised. Why would you go back to school, Rick? You do all these different things. And I said I wanted to teach. I'd never had a Latino professor in my life. I never had a Latino teacher in my life. The first time in my entire life I had someone teach me who was not Anglo was this year at Pierce College. My Chicano studies professor. To me, it was he kind of talked like a homeboy. It was funny. He was like, hey, Rick, what's going on? You're a Chicano professor studies? We study about Chicanos. He'd tell me this stuff. And I had a bad experience when I grew up, because when I grew up, it started out, first of all, I don't speak Spanish that well. You know, a lot of people are surprised by that. In fact, my wife speaks better Spanish than me. My kids speak better Spanish than me. I send them to a multicultural language center where they learn Spanish every day. It's like Spanish waterboarding. It's like agua, agua, agua. They're forcing them to speak Spanish every day. And my kids now speak beautiful Spanish. And my kids are Mexicans. They are not pure Mexican. My wife is Anglo-American. A lot of people are surprised by that. I met her at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. She was, in fact, on the board of the Hispanic Chamber. And I met her at this Chamber of Commerce, and her name was Susie Albin. And I assumed Albin must be Spanish. And so she's just Spanish with blonde hair and blue-eyed. So she's Spanish. She tricked me. I married her. And of course, we have 3 Mexican children, Mexicans, and they're beautiful. And there's cultural differences. We have to deal with that. I adjust with it all the time. There are cultural differences. Here's one. Simple cultural difference. My wife wakes me up in the morning. She wakes me up, Rick, we're going to go do something really fun and culturally great and bring the kids. We're going to go. It's going to be, I go, what is it? She always loves to surprise me. I hate surprises. I go, I don't want any surprise whatsoever. She goes, no, I'm going to surprise you. I'm gonna surprise you. So I normally work late at night, either doing shows or writing shows and stuff like that. So she wakes me up, surprises me, puts me in the car, takes me out with the kids, and takes me to a farm. And this farm is called a You Pick 'em farm. So you go out in the farm and you pick fruit and you pay for it. Who would take a Mexican to a middle of a farm to pick fruit and pay for it? So I'm in the middle of the farm just picking strawberries with my kids going, this is some ridiculousness. The irony is really hitting me. There's a black guy next to me going, if there's cotton, I'm killing someone. It's like all the minorities are feeling horrible at this place. This is like the worst. My wife's having a great time. My kids are having fun, but that's a You Pick 'em farm. There's cultural differences between us all. I understand that. I really do. I can sit there and tell you the cultural things about, the Mexican-American experience. It goes, we can go back to going, treated Hidalgo and all these things, 1848, and all these different things that we can look at and see it. And then, of course, there's the Cinco de Mayo. I don't know if many people know about Cinco de Mayo, of course. This is when we fought the French. Very important for us, we fought the French. Because the French wanted us to wear little hats, and we wear big hats, and that was the beginning of our war. And you can write that down for yourself because it's a historical fact. I took Chicano studies, and so I know it's true. So let's get on to my life. Understanding me is I grew up in San Diego. Sarah Palin grew up where she could see Russia from her kitchen window. I grew up where I could see Mexico from my back door. And I saw it. I grew up 15 miles from the border. So I grew up on the border. And I had the Mexican kids live down the street from me. And there's a group of Mexican kids that lived there. It was a whole family. They lived on a chicken ranch with those chickens and things like that. I lived up the street. And there's another Latino family that lived about a few blocks away. The daughter was into science, big science person. The son was into junior theater with me, and we went to theater as kids. So as a kid, I didn't experience really prejudice in some ways that people would understand. But I did remember one time I did experience it horribly. And I tell this story merely to kind of explain what I'd gone through. And I'm not asking for any sort of woe me or any of those thousand things, but it's telling how we think. And this is when you're about 9 years old, and when you're, as a kid, some of your biggest memories will shape your life. And for me, it was a simple memory. So the Mexican kids are down the street. And I told my mom, I'm going to play with the Mexican kids down the street. And she said, you are Mexican, so you can stay home and play with yourself. And the joke later on became, because I put in a play, was I got bored and I was worried about going blind. So I went up to the school. You can figure that joke out later. So I went to the school, and there I was, and there was a kid there, and he was a white kid. I remember. And Mexicans will call Anglo people, Anglos. I know it bothers people sometimes. We'll say Anglos, you know, European Americans, all those things. So there's a white kid there. I remember his name was Bradley. And I had my ball. I was so proud of my ball. I was playing handball against the court. And Bradley looks at me and he grabs the ball and he goes, "That's my ball." I said, "No, Bradley, it's my ball." He goes, "No, it's my ball." I go, "No, it's my ball." And he grabbed it back from me. He pushes me on the ground. He said, "Well, it's my ball now, wetback." I never heard the term before. Didn't sound like a bad word. Dry back, quarterback, halfback, wetback. So it sounded kind of a nice thing in a weird way. But I was suspicious, so I figured he insulted me in some way, so I basically beat him up. So I went Oscar de la Hoya on him, which is another Mexican we can talk about at a special time. And the teacher ran up to me, and she looked at me, and she goes, "Why'd you beat up Bradley?" And I said, "Because he called me a wetback." And there I am, this little güero kid, very light. And she looks at me, and she goes, "Are you Mexican?" And I said proudly, "Yes." And she looks at me, and she goes, "Well, then you are a wetback." But she said it so sweet, I felt horrible because I beat up poor Bradley for no apparent reason. It took me years to realize I'd just been insulted. But at that moment, I realized there was something different about me. There's only 3 Mexican families that lived in La Mesa. My family had actually, our part of our history is that we started off in Chihuahua, Mexico, and then Pancho Villa's men came and started counting our cattle, which is basically like an audit for Mexicans. We knew time to leave. So we left there, we went to New Mexico, got White Sands Missile Range area, and then the government came in and started kicking us off that, and so we ended up in California. So, and then I was born. My mother from Boone, Iowa. Yes, Mexicans are all over the country. In fact, the biggest growth of Latinos in America is not in California, it's in the South. And my mother, along with most Mexicans, immigrated this country through the trains. My great-grandfather worked on trains. So they were on a train, they went to Texas. They said people in Texas were mean to them. So they got back on the train. That's how they tell the story. Fell asleep and woke up in Boone, Iowa, end of the line. And they said, "Screw it, we'll just live here." And they did. And they lived a great life. Boone, Iowa. So I grew up on Midwestern food. I grew up on ham, green beans, ambrosia salad, corn on the cob, all wrapped in a flour tortilla. So that was my experience. So I had that Midwestern side. My father he grew up Chicano during the Zoot Suit riots and things like that. In fact, he went to World War II at 17. And my mother had a brother who went to World War II at 17 as well. Mexicans have served in the military for years. It's part of who we are. So we went. So I told my mom I was going to play with Mexican kids. And I go there and this experience happens to me. And I thought about it. It was always bothering me why I wrote. So I wrote because I wanted to explain my life. And that's really it. We all want to be understood. Anglo, Black, you name it, everyone wants to be understood. We want to be understood, we want to be respected, we want to be treated fairly. That's pretty much it, it's a human nature. You know, we're no different. And so I started writing the stories down. And here's a nice ending to that story before I go on. The other kid lived up the street was a guy named Ty Ochoa. He went to junior theater with me. And the other kid down the street was Juan Vargas. Juan Vargas is now a congressman. Ty Ochoa's sister is Ellen Ochoa, the first Mexican-American astronaut. So an astronaut, a congressman, and me, all growing up literally blocks from each other. And those are the stories you don't get to hear about Latinos, the untold stories, the stories I want to tell. And that's what really drove me to be a writer. In fact, as a writer, I have dyslexia. I have dyslexia and I have ADHD. Look, flowers. The point is, thank you for getting that. So here I have dyslexia, I have ADHD, flunked in first year in kindergarten. I was flunked because the teacher felt that I was slow because I didn't talk to the other kids and I didn't go talk to her. And I came from a very Mexican polite background, so we didn't speak. The teacher was in charge and you took class and you didn't speak. So she assumed that I was actually, at that time, they considered slow or other words. So they flunked me. So here I'm flunked in school. My first academia experience is failure, utter failure. I'm flunked and held back. Nothing worse for a kindergarten kid to be held back. So one teacher in particular started looking at me and said, he doesn't seem not intelligent. He seems actually pretty smart. And so she said, hey, I'll take you aside and teach you. And you'll go to my class, and afterwards, I want to teach you how to write. So how did I learn to write? So she said, I'm going to make this thing. It was amazing to me. It's a cardboard thing she would cut out, a piece of cardboard. And then she'd put cloth underneath it and then put like wax paper. And she'd iron the wax paper and the cloth together to the cardboard. And she would take pages and sew them into the book. And I'd have a book. And then she'd say, tell me your story. And so I'd tell a story. And one day I made up a story called The Colored Boy. It was a colored boy. It was a simple story. I said it was about a boy who lived in a land of La Mesa, where I grew up, La Mesa, California. And he changed every color in the world, and no one knew how to be prejudiced against him because they couldn't define him. He would always change colors. Finally, he didn't have friends, but he would change colors. So then someone came down from another planet in a spaceship and said, hey, we're colored where we live. We're every color there is in the world. In fact, we honor color. We think color is the greatest thing you can be. And every shade of color you are, and every accent you have, all that is honored in our planet. And you can come to our planet and be honored as well. That's a book I wrote when I was 8 years old in school. And I began to realize, looking back on now, maybe I was the colored boy. I was looking at color, I was looking at race, I was looking at issues like that. Because being Latino in America, in a lot of ways, we're confronted with it every single day, as I know a lot of people are, and we all are. And trust me, it's not to say that I'm any less prejudiced than anyone else in the world. In fact, I'm prejudiced a lot of times. In fact, I was speaking in Texas one time, and a big Texan came up toward me, you know, big tall guy with a hat. And I was at the Alley Theater, and I was speaking, and afterwards he came up to me and goes, hey, you, hold on, you. And I thought, oh man, big Texas guy, this is not gonna end well. My Latino street smarts started kicking in. Fight or flight, how's it gonna go? And he goes, grabs me and he says, I just wanna say thank you. Thank you for being you. Because I came here not knowing what I was gonna hear, but I realized I'm you too. And I related to you. And I wanna thank you. Taught me a lesson. I have prejudice within me. We all do. We all have our ideas of what people are like and who they are. And I realize the more travel that I don't have the answers. I mean, just even sitting down here, this wonderful woman over here, she's from India, correct?
Yes, I'm in India.
India.
I'm from India.
You're from,
Mexican from India.
she's Mexican from India. Mexican from India, and she represents the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, correct? So I'm constantly learning what Mexican and Latino is, because it's constantly changing. It's a unique form of who we are, that we're being Latino in America. See, Latino in America is a great thing. I see it as such a powerful, wonderful opportunity for America. You know, if California is one of the 6 largest economies in the world, correct? 6 to 8. You guys are from the Silicon Valley. You're far more smarter than I should be. And 6th or 8th economy in the world. We have 2 million undocumented people here in America. 50% of them work in the fields. Actually, 50%. 50% of all the produce comes from California. 50%. 50%. So how can we be the 6th largest economy in the world if we have 2 million undocumented people here and there's such a burden to us? I started seeing these aren't true. These facts are spinned a certain way. And working in the media, I started realizing I had to be smart, and I had to look I had to really look at the question. I had to understand who I was first as a Latino, to understand my history, understand everything about myself, and understand we didn't just come here, name the cities and streets, and then leave. You know, we were here. We've always been here. You know, going up here, I was just driven here from the hotel, drove me here in the shuttle, and the woman goes, what are you going there to do? I go, I'm going to speak. And she goes, on what? I said, Hispanic heritage. Why are you speaking about it? I go, well, I'm Mexican-American. You're Mexican? She's so surprised. It's always a surprise to people in Mexico. It's like, I'm sorry, there's not a burro next to me. Was this a problem to figure out that I don't have a thick accent? I'm sorry, I don't look anything like Paul Rodriguez. I'm not fitting your stereotype. But I didn't say that, of course. I was very polite. And I said, yeah, I'm talking about Hispanic heritage. And she goes, didn't this used to be Mexico? And I said, correct. It used to be Mexico. You'd be surprised how people don't see that we've always been here. It's not that we didn't. Even in my family, from 1910, we came over to Chihuahua. I remember going to Chihuahua. The Mexican government actually invited me there. I went to Chihuahua, and there's a plaque. It said, for the million people who died during the Mexican Revolution, except for the Najeras who left immediately before the revolution and never died for this country, which is basically true. We left. We were smart. I hate to say it. My grandfather had 9 sons and didn't want to give them to Pancho Villa's army, so we crossed the border. But did we not serve America? You think about it, a lot of times people don't realize that we have served. My father was in World War II and Vietnam. World War II and Vietnam. You think about it. I asked him one day, why'd you go to Vietnam, Dad? Because you were out of the military. And you went there as a civil servant to fix all the jets and the helicopters. And I said, you went to Vietnam as a civil servant? He goes, yeah. I went there during that holiday. They needed a lot of help. I go, what holiday was that? He goes, the Christmas Tet. Yeah, I added that for him. I said, you went there during the Tet offensive, correct? He goes, yeah, it was Tet, it was a holiday. I go, why'd you go? He goes, oh, overtime. They were offering overtime if you went to Vietnam and you went to combat pay. And he was a civilian. A Mexican went all the way to Vietnam for overtime. That's a Mexican work ethic that I can't explain to anyone. And it made total sense to me. Our love of family, our love of culture, our love of country. No one loves America more than Mexicans. I hate to say it, we're the most decorated minority there is per capita. More Medal of Honor winners. My own other uncle, who came from Boone, Iowa, my mother's side, Joe Obaye. He went on to World War II. At 17, he enlisted, went to the Philippines, captured by the Japanese when the Japanese took over the Philippines, forced on a march called the March of Bataan, ended up in a POW camp, and right before he was liberated, they threw him in a pit with gasoline, machine gunned to death with other soldiers, and burnt their bodies. It's all documented. We've died for this country. My family, personally, has died for this country. I've gone overseas. We were just talking about being around the military. I grew up in San Diego. I was offered the chance to join the Marines as an officer. They have a program for law. You could be a captain, and you get to be a lawyer at the same time. And you get to have a gun. I thought, this is the 3 that really want me to be interested. But at the last minute, the guy said to me, the recruiter, you're gonna go to Quantico, get ready to slug through that mud and all that stuff and a lot of push-ups. At the same time, I'd been offered a role at the Old Globe Theater. Romeo, push-ups. I went to my father. And I said, Dad, I can go to the military. I know it would probably make you very proud, everyone proud. I wanna do this, but I got offered this show. My dad looked at me, a very smart man, and said, there's no war going on right now, Rick. We've lost a relative in virtually every war. Maybe just go out and talk and entertain people. That's enough. So I went into entertainment. How did I go into entertainment? When I was 17, my dad took me, I think it was about 15, my dad took me to a play, a movie. It's called Cromwell. And they were speaking beautiful. And my dad turned to me, and he was a door-to-door salesman. And he turned to me and he said, Rick, if you could speak as beautiful as that, I'd be so proud of you. Mexicans love to please our family. We're more loyal sometimes to our family than even to ourselves individually. We tend to put family over your own wants and wishes sometimes. Sometimes it's difficult for Latinos even going away to college because they're separated from their families. There's programs like Southwest Airlines did a program where they could bring Latino families back with their families because community is so important to us. Seeing people that look like us is important to us. Being part of the community. So I listened to my father and I memorized Shakespeare. I started reading Shakespeare every single day. And I memorized Shakespeare and I went to the Old Globe Theater in San Diego. And they said, you want to audition? I said, yes. And so I went to audition. And everything good that ever starts in your life will always start with a yes. Most likely. I have to rethink that for a second, but on the whole, I would say yes. Yes is the beginning. So I said, yes, I'd like to audition. And they turned and they said, what would you like to do? I said, Romeo. So I looked, I said, but soft. but like the yonder window breaks, it is east, and Juliet is the sun. And I spoke as beautifully as I could, and I filled it with belief and passion, and they gave me the job. I got a job at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, and I started working. And no one knew I was Mexican. In fact, the only time they knew I was Mexican one time, there was a man on stage, a janitor, sweeping up, and he was singing a corrido. I knew the corrido. I started singing along with him. I was backstage, getting makeup on. And one of the actors looked at me and said, "How do you know those words?" I said, "Oh, yeah, it's El Rey. It's, you know, it's a great corrido." I was explaining it to him. He goes, "How do you know that?" And he goes, I said, "Because I'm Mexican." And he goes, "You're Mexican?" Once again, always such a surprise to so many people. I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Wow. Well, there's your people on stage." And I remembered that. And I said, "No, I'm going to have more people on stage. I'm going to have more opportunities for other Latinos." Because opportunities for Latinos are actually opportunities for all of us. And that's one of the things, because it's a win-win situation. You know, we're talking about a philosopher or a Russian author who said, when you open a school door, you close a prison door. I'm still thinking who said that. I remembered it always. When you open a school door, you close a prison door. And I thought about that. So education became very important to me, especially since I flunked school and stuff like that. And so at the Old Globe Theater, I studied as hard as I could. I eventually got a chance to go to American Conservatory Theater. And I learned this is my life. How could a Mexican kid with 5 kids in one bedroom, because that's how we moved into La Mesa. It was a nice upper class, middle class families. And then there was us who bought a little home there in La Mesa, because my mother from Boone, Iowa said, my kids will go to a good school if they go to that area. And that was her plan. So we grew up there. Of course, I was poor. 5 kids in one bedroom. I understood what hunger was. My mother was a waitress. My dad was a sheet metal worker at North Island Naval Air Station. So every time I give a speech, and I give speeches around the country, I always look at a banquet hall, and I always see a woman that's out there in the banquet hall serving the people and the guests. And I always think of my mother. I can never forget her. I always think that's my mother. We see each other and other people. It's hard for a Latino ever to forget yourself. You're constantly reminded. I mean, I'm driving to Oxnard College to speak, and on the side of the field are farm workers, people picking strawberries, not because their wife put them up to it, because an actual job, and they're building our economy. I can't forget where I come from, no matter where I get in Hollywood or all the different things I've done and stuff like that, because I have an inherent sense of who I am. And everyone should have that. Everyone should be happy with who they are and embrace all aspects of who they are. You know, I remember growing up in California during the whole time of the Chicano movement. The Chicano movement during the 70s was pretty amazing. I actually got invited to go to USC. I couldn't afford it. There was no scholarships at that time for people of color, at least there. And how much USC cost was incredible. I mean, it was like to a Mexican family, it's like, Dad's $50,000 a year. Mijo, no. You know, you can buy a house. You can buy 5 houses. And those 5 houses, you'll move, and that's the Mexican mentality. You need a job that's steady. The Army or the post office. They never get fired from the post office. In the Army, there's always a war. Steady job. He chose me to be an artist. He actually supported that. From a guy that was a door-to-door salesman who went from door to door, because he told me one simple thing that would always haunt me in Hollywood. He said, Rick, I'd go from one door and I'd knock on it, and they'd say no. I'd go to another door and knock on it, and they'd say no. But around the 1000th door, they'd say yes. You have to hear a lot of no's before you hear that one yes. That was what he gave me. So going into Hollywood, from that era, from leaving ACT, going to Hollywood, I started playing roles of gangsters and bad guys, because being Latino, that tended to be what they would give you. In fact, I was a Cuban drug lord in one movie with George Clooney. Actually, me and George Clooney were Cuban drug lords. Or I was a Cuban drug lord. He was just a white drug lord. And he was the good guy and I was the bad guy. And I always asked the director, why am I the bad guy? Because, well, you're the Cuban drug lord. I go, but he's a drug lord too. We're both selling drugs. Why is he the good guy? Well, it's just the way it is, Rick. Get used to it. I remember that. And I said, I can't play these roles. In fact, it came to a head when one time while we were filming, I'm outside dressed as a Cuban drug lord with a gun in my pocket, and I'm in Compton, one of the worst areas, right before 92, before the riots happened. And there I am filming. And I hear pop, 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 pop. I'm thinking, that sounds a lot like a gunshot. That sounds a lot like a gunshot. Now, La Mesa isn't the toughest area in San Diego, but I had heard gunshots before. Sure enough, I'm outside, and I see a guy limping. He's running, and he's limping. And there's another guy directly behind him with a gun. Pop, pop, pop. I see this. And I instinctually reach for my gun. It has full blanks, so they're going to make really loud noises, but of course it doesn't do anything. So I reach for my gun. He has his gun out. He points it toward me, and he looks at me, and I imagine his eyes thinking, what's a Cuban drug lord doing in Compton? Because that's how ridiculous I must have been looking. And he just, for a second, looks at me, he changes and starts shooting at the other guy and runs off. I rushed to the one local policeman on our set because it was low budget. I said, you got to call the cops. There's a shooting over here. This guy's been shot. He turns to me and goes, that happens here all the time. Not going to call that in. Gene Simmons was part of the movie, came outside with his AK-47, it was fake. He goes, oh yeah, in Israel, happens all the time. Don't worry about it. What's for lunch? And I started seeing something. It started bothering me. Maybe we were becoming the roles we were portraying. Maybe we were adding to the problem, not being the solution. And I've always felt that Latinos are the solution, never the problem. And why do I say that? Because how well we are educated versus incarcerated. You're at JFKU University, this is about education, and you're in Northern California, where Stanford and great hubs of education there. Imagine what it is to educate someone versus incarcerate someone. Look at the difference. I realized education was my way out. That's why I studied Shakespeare. I had dyslexia, looked flowers, and I studied Shakespeare, and I knew it well. I knew education would work. And there I went from going to a school, American Conservatory Theater, going into Hollywood, and I started saying, I got to write. I said, how do I start writing? Very simple. I remember a woman in San Diego, because you need a lot of allies to make it in Hollywood or in life. And there was a woman in San Diego. She was a single mother, black woman. And San Diego was very blonde and blue-eyed, and both me and her did not fit what theater was in that time. So I was at the San Diego Rep, and she was at San Diego Rep as well. And she said, hey, they're doing a show called Second City. It's an improv show. And they're looking for different people. They're gonna be at Second City. And I said, okay. She goes, it's improv. I said, well, I don't know much about improv. She goes, improv is just this, say yes. So I'm saying yes. That's it. So I went to an audition, and there it was, Second City Improv in Chicago. And the guy turns to me and he goes, do you know how to do improv? And I said, yes, I do. Would you like to do improv right now? Yes, I would. And all the improv was agreeing with everything he did. There's a big pirate ship. That's the biggest ship I've ever seen, Captain. Oh, just agreeing with everything. And everything's got funnier and funnier, and it worked. And he gave me the job. And once I got on the set, I realized I was too young to be in the set. I was maybe a kid at that time. And the older woman, black woman, was there, said, Rick, you're a writer. If you write and I write, we'll stay here longer. So I started writing. I said yes to writing. That woman is Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg inspired me to write. And then it's funny enough, I went to Hollywood, and my neighbor one day took me to his mailbox, and we were both taking out mail, and I had written some plays, and I was getting royalties, and I was so excited. I was like, I'm an international author. This is a play that I wrote that's now in Canada, and I'm getting a royalty. And he turned to me and he said, oh, this is, we get in TV, this. And he pulled out a green envelope. It just came in his mail. He goes, it's a residual. I go, residual? He goes, yes, every time my show plays, I get a residual. I go, no, I get a royalty. He opened his box, his card, letter, showed it to me. It was like $36,000, I remember it. Like, that's a residual? $36,000? Mine was $367. I remember they were very close, but just a lot of different digits there. So I said, I'm going to do what you do. And he encouraged me. That man is John Wells, who was president of the WJ and all that. So here, Whoopi Goldberg, John Wells, all these people pushing me toward writing. Father, sometimes we have to look at the universe and go, what am I supposed to do? Because it'll find you. It'll help you find what you're supposed to do. And so I started writing, and my plays started taking off, and after a while, I ended up in Living Color. How did I get in Living Color? Simple. Keenan Ivory Wayans saw me do comedy, and he liked the monologue I was doing, and other people were doing them. And I went into audition, and he said to me, he goes, a lot of people do that monologue. Where'd that come from? And I go, I wrote it. He goes, you wrote it? I go, yeah. He goes, how did it do? And I go, well, it did about 1 million in ticket sales. He heard the word million, ticket sales, put it together, and he said, okay, audition as a writer. Make me laugh. Imagine that, in Living Color. Güero, me, walking to Living Color. And there I was, and he said, make me laugh. Keenan was sitting there, 2 large guys next to him, kind of bodyguard type figures. He was having this lunch. I remember it. He had dark glasses on. And so I said, okay. This character is called Wanda. I got you, I got you. So I'm doing this thing, Jamie Foxx's character. Now I'm pursing my lips, putting on a voice like Jamie Foxx, and doing Wanda. And I thought either they're gonna be so offended that they'll kick me out of the office, or they'll laugh. Sure enough, Keenan laughed. Keenan laughed. He thought I was this crazy guy that would come in and do Wanda right there, and he gave me my first job. That job led to another job, led to another job. That's the beauty of it. These steps we take lead us together. Because in the end, it's not that Latinos haven't been a part of America. We've been a part of America from the beginning. This used to be Mexico. And it's okay that it's not, because to tell you the truth, I love the American system. I love the Constitution, I love our freedoms, I love a lot of things about us. I prefer this system of government. And I know people hear stories about, oh, the Chicanos are out there going to Reconquista, they're gonna take over. Not at all. Have you ever been to a Chicanos meeting, a Mecha meeting? Not exactly the best people that are gonna be able to take over this California, and they don't want to. They really don't. We just wanna be included. We just wanna be respected, included. We wanna be a part of the solution. In fact, I went to a Mecha meeting one time at USC when I tried to get money. I went to a Mecha, and I'm not putting Mecha down. I happen to like a lot of people that are in Mecha, but they looked at me, Güero. I remember the guy's words. He said, look at you. Oh, Güero, don't speak Spanish too well. Looking all Güero like that. I don't think you felt enough pain or prejudice in your lifetime to join our Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. I said, Xochimilco, Cuauhtémoc, does right now count? Of course, they didn't get what I was saying. We have eternal prejudice against ourselves sometimes. Latinos go through that. We have that with all ethnic groups and all people. You know, people sometimes don't get along, and sometimes people don't help even their own. And that's what I say with being Latinos are the solution, not the problem. If you look at us and you say, we're the young culture, we're a young group of people. In fact, the highest number of children in our school system under 5 are Latino. That means a whole generation of people that happen to be of Latino ancestry, mostly Mexicans, something like 70% are mostly Mexican Latinos in the United States, 58 million Latinos in the United States today, a young demographic. Right now, they've estimated that right now there'll be something like 1 million new jobs that have to happen in the last 10 years. They're going to deal with tech to make California sustainable. Where are you going to get those people? It's going to be from Latinos. So if we're not looking after Latinos, if not for the sheer care or compassion of wanting one group of people to integrate and be a part of our society, but to look at it and go, it's our benefit. This is our tax system. To make sure I'm not having cat food when I'm 70 years old on my retirement plan, and I'm not having something like that, but I'm having a good retirement, I need a tax base that will help me. And that's what Latinos are. No matter what. When you look at what's happening now in America, where they're talking about the 800,000 dreamers that may not get citizenship. Imagine 800,000 children, high school kids, college kids, may not become citizens, are given a path to citizenship. In fact, remember, they they belong to families. So you take that 800,000, you include their family, that's something like 5 million people. The amazing number of people that already pay into the tax system, that actually pay money to stay in America, that pay fines to do these things. They're doing that. We're willing to let them go? The great thing about America is this. America does something better than any country in the whole world. America makes Americans. They've been doing it from the beginning. I can use a little historical fact on you. Do you guys realize when we took over Mexico, or this part of Mexico, during the war, the Mexican-American War, do you realize 1/4 of the soldiers were Irish immigrants? 1/4 were Irish immigrants. And in fact, the Irish who actually went into Mexico joined the Mexican side. They were called the San Patricios. The Irish, German, I'm not even calling the German immigrants who were the same with the group. There must have been almost 50% of the army was immigrants. Immigrants taking over the Southwest for America. We've always been an immigrant nation. We've always been part of this cavalcade of what we are, this tapestry. And your history is my history, and my history is your history. And that's what Latinos are. We're American. We're part of this country. And I can prove it by just looking at my own personal stories of my family. My uncle dying in World War II, my father serving in World War II, my father serving in Vietnam, my other uncle serving in Korea, in Vietnam as well. Families have been over to Iraq. I even went overseas to entertain the troops. I felt that obligated. Even though I didn't serve in the Marines, I felt obligated enough to go overseas. And I'll tell you, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, entertaining the troops. Nothing made me happier. And these Latino kids would come up to me and say, "Thank you for being out here. You're a hero." I say a few jokes and get a couple laughs. You guys get shot out. You're the real heroes. But they were so happy to hear their stories and hear someone on stage talking about them. And they related to it because they love America more than anyone I knew. I saw it in every one of their faces. So when we look at America, we're at a very hard time right now for Latinos. They keep saying Latinos are the problem. They keep wanting to build a bigger wall. I feel like I'm in a Game of Thrones episode. It's always about the wall. You ever notice that? Game of Thrones about the walls and the white walkers. Now they're brown walkers. That's the big difference. And we're worried. We're going to build up a wall. And walls never work. Hadrian's Wall didn't work. The Berlin Wall didn't work. The Chinese Great Wall of China didn't work. The Chinese put it up to keep the Mongol hordes from out of China. Within a generation, there was a Mongol emperor in top of China. Walls have never worked. In fact, I went to Israel recently. I was just there. There are walls there all over. And I related a little bit more to the Palestinians sometimes because I saw how the walls were there. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my Jewish neighbors and friends. That was one of the best times I've ever had. But I realized, and I was saddened by seeing these walls. And in fact, while I was there was a stabbing a block away from me. The security was worried about me. And I thought about it, the walls. So when we talk about Latino Heritage Month, and I know we bring us out and we talk about it then, it's your month too, whether you're Latino, or you're African American, Asian American, or Indian Mexican, or all those things, you're a Latino as well. In fact, you look at all the different things that unite us as people and unite what Latino is. I can even look at my biggest hero when growing up was Desi Arnaz. Desi Arnaz, huge hero. But you ever heard his song, Babalu? Right? Babalu, oh yeah, Babalu, that song. Well, guess what happens to that song? The song, if you break down the words, he says he wants a negra bambona. A negra bambona. It means a voluptuous black woman. It was written by a man named Miguelito Valdez, who was called El Negro. That's the black Cuban side of that experience. Well, there is no experience that's particularly Latino. The one thing I can say about Latino is this. The one thing we can say about Latino is that we are diverse. We can say that about Latinos, that we don't know borders. We don't do well in borders. We like to cross them. We like to get involved because you can't hold life back. And growing up in San Diego, California, I would see that border across the way from me. And I'd think to myself, in the shadow of that border, that a border really should be something we share, not let it be something that separates us. And what this talk is about is really to talk about the things that we do have in common, the things that we do share as Americans and as Latinos. Because the beauty of what I've experienced is the more I've allowed diversity in my life, the more that I've embraced diversity, the more it's opened opportunities. And imagine if you can open opportunities for Latinos to be a part of your world. Latinos, spending power of Latinos is $1.5 trillion, they estimated, which is the economy of all of Canada. 58 million Latinos in this country, $1.5 trillion buying power. That's a market you want to be a part of. That's a group of people you want to be a part of. So when we say it is Hispanic Heritage Month, all I ask is think it as your month too. No matter whether you're Latino or Anglo or African American or Indian from Mexico. This is your month as well. So celebrate this month. Go out, reach out, ask to be understood. Tell your story. Tell your story to one another. Don't be scared to ask dumb questions. I always tell people that. In fact, I was on a train, I was speaking at Harvard. I was on a train going to Harvard, and across from me was two men. They were dressed Orthodox Jewish. Paisleys, the whole thing. Very Jewish. And there I'm sitting across from them, 4-hour drive, I think it is, train ride. And I looked at them and I said, what's it like being Jewish? The men looked at me. The guy said, no one's ever asked me that question before. We got 4 hours. I'll tell you everything about being Jewish. So for 4 hours, we talked of everything of what I could ever learn about Judaism. In fact, at the end of it, he gave me a thing called kugel, which is a great pastry dish. It's really good. And he gave me some other food, and he gave it to me. He said, hey, just take that with you. It's really delicious. My wife made it. You can have it. We talked. You know, it's a great moment. I go back to Hollywood. I'm at CBS Studios. I'm there. A year later, I get a phone call. Hey, it's Menachem. How you doing? Hey, Menachem. How you doing? Yeah, from the train. Yeah, hey, I'm in LA. I'd like to go to CBS. No problem. The same courtesy he showed me, I showed him. He comes to CBS. We get our pictures taken, all the sets and things like that. It's a wonderful experience. My life was enriched by asking a simple question to two Jewish men sitting across from me. Your life will be enriched if you're not Latino. If you ask a Latino a question, what's it like? And this is true of all people. I did a campaign called Prop 38 where I was running the Latino division of it. And it was run by a woman named Molly Munger, Charles Munger's daughter. Very rich woman, extremely rich. And one day she takes me to lunch. She goes, what's it like being Mexican? And we had a great lunch talking about it. I turned to her, I go, what's it like to be so rich you can buy anything you want? She goes, a lot of responsibility. And I learned something. That was her idea. Being super rich is a lot of responsibility. She goes, what's it like being Mexican? Being Mexican, a lot of responsibility. You always got to be a certain way. You got to tell people your story. You got to be this way. And believe me, a Latino, every time we hear of a gunfight or something horrible like that, I'm going, please, God, don't let it be a Mexican. Please, God. And I got to tell you, we have that want, that need to be the people that really help America, that really stand up and fight for this country, and give this country and give back. So Hispanic Heritage Month is all of our months. Thank you very much. Now, thank you. Well, I wanted to, do you want me to do the questions? Yes, I want to open up to questions because I just don't necessarily want to talk to you. I want to talk with you. So if anyone has any questions, seriously, this is my, yes.
Every time that somebody asks me or tells me you don't look Latino, my question is that I use Socratic questioning.
Yeah.
And now my question is, how do Latinos look like?
Well, you look, okay, I'll answer that question. Her question was, when people ask her, you don't look Latino, her question is Socratic method of, what does a Latino look like to you? And I'd say that's an interesting question because the truth is, you look like my grandmother. So for me, you look exactly what a Latino looks like. Are you Mexican?
No,
Cuban, okay. Well, still Latina. So my grandmother looked exactly like you. You know, that was pretty much it. My grandfather too. And my grandfather was a big, tall, weirdo guy from Chihuahua, blue eyes. You know, my grandma was a little darker than you, but basically looked like you. And that's what a Latino looks like. You know, we come in every size, shape, and color. I always joke, mostly large size because we love fried food. But the truth is, we're every single side of us is what a Latino is. It's the most diverse culture in the world. It's also one of the diverse countries in the world. If you go to Mexico, you can walk on the streets and just the Templo Mayor. You'll be down the Zocalo. You'll see history. You walk among history. And the food, amazing. So the best food that's happening right now in the world is Mexican cuisine. It's being revitalized. It's being rediscovered. You know, look what Mexico has given to people, Latin America. We didn't have the tomato in Europe. Latin America. There's so many things that we've added to what food is in our world. Potatoes, Latin America. All these different things, Latin America. You know, so we have added. And also, since we do come in every size, shape, and color, I think sometimes people don't realize that's our strength, not our failure. In fact, if you look at me being güero and my sister being dark, we had two different experiences, what it was like living in America. I saw her receive a little more prejudice than me. It was quite well. I received a different kind of prejudice. They'd say, oh, those Mexicans. I go, hey, I'm Mexican. You're not one of those Mexicans, Rick. I hear that a lot. You're not one of those Mexicans. I'd say, who are those Mexicans? Because I feel like I'm one of them. So that happens. But this is what our human experience is. We see our world and our family. I think in the end, you know, we all are brothers and sisters in the end. There is no race but the human race. That's all there is. The idea of black, Latino, all that are made up concepts, really, of what that means. You know, even you look at the word Cuban. Now, Cuban is a whole different history. There's Cubans from Cuba now, Cubans that came during the Manuelito exodus, Cubans that came before that, before Castro. Each one is a different set of Cubans with different experiences. Just like in the African-American community. I could sit there and go, if you're an African-American from Chicago, are you the same African-American experience as someone from Atlanta? I'd say no. Your Mexican experience will be different than the Cuban experience, but still there's similarities in our experiences and there's shared cultures and histories. That's our strength. So yes, to me you look like a Latino.
I just want to our identity. And it is, I come from the Northeast, and in the Northeast I was a Hispanic. Here in California, I am a Latina. But in both the designations, it is both of them are missing something extremely important with us Latinos, and it is the Indian heritage,
Yes.
the American Indian heritage, and the Afro American heritage. You know, Hispanic and Latinos are all designations coming from Europe.
Yeah.
So we have to find another way of calling Latinos, because otherwise we are skipping a tremendous number of Latinos.
It's true anytime you use a language, you go, you know, there's an old story that the Eskimos have something like, I don't know how many words for snow. And the same thing with Latino. Latino is an encompassing word, but if I sat there and said, you're an American, what does that mean? Are you American from New York? Are you American from Chicago? Are you an American from Boone, Iowa? Are you American from Atlanta? All these different things. I'll tell you when you become an American. It's actually, for me, my experience when I became an American when I went overseas. Then you're the American. You're just in a group of Americans. And you get with the Americans. And you're with the Americans. And you feel American. In America, it's different because we have so many titles and names and descriptions of us. Because we have a heritage of where that was a problem. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I look at it and I go, Chihuahua, Mexico, Taino Indians. Huge amount of Indians. You know, Mexico Mexico, one time they called me at the Despierta America and they said, well, you don't speak Spanish very well. I said, well, actually, 10% of Mexico doesn't speak Spanish at all. 10% of Mexico doesn't speak Spanish. They speak native languages. Yeah.
But, thinking about the sort of the irony of tomorrow being Columbus Day, who was the first illegal immigrant to the Americas from Europe.
Yeah.
And the fact that we are still so European-centric, Eurocentric, that we think of Latin America as, quotes, Latin America, when they were the invaders and the Latinos, and of course Columbus was Latin, i.e. Italian.
Yeah.
Right.
Working for
Which
Spain.
had nothing to do with the people who actually live here or who are native.
Yeah, and he made the biggest
to
mistake.
all of the Americas.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking, I don't know if you have any thoughts about the fact that we even call ourselves Latin Americans. I'm Ortiz, and my father's from Uruguay.
Yeah.
But my mother's Norwegian. You fill out the form and say, what is your ethnic or historical background? I have to start checking box after box.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
what are we really? Are we really Latin Americans? Are we just Americans with some Latin infiltration?
Those terms are evolving. That's the thing, is that they really are evolving. Because you look at it and go, when I grew up, first of all, I never understood Mexico because I was never taught Mexico. In the California system, there's no speaking of Mexico, at least when I was a kid. In elementary school, they never taught a word about Mexico. In fact, I only realized Mexico when we studied India, ironically. So we're studying India. And then the woman came in, my teacher came in dressed in the Indian sari, she's blonde and all that. She's making chapati. And she's this, and I said, tortillas. She goes, no, chapati. I go, tortillas. She goes, no, chapati. And she kicked me out of the class because being unruly, saying that they were tortillas. But to me, those were tortillas. And she was teaching about India when I was 15 miles away from Mexico. And it hit me as ironic that no one ever taught me about Mexico. So those terms, like when you go Latin America, Hispanic America, whatever it is, and you're in Mexico and they say American, Mexicans go, we're American too. They're part of North America. They think it's weird that we say Americans, we're Americans. Well, Mexicans go, we're Americans too. We're from North America, we share the same continent, we're Americans. So those are terms that, in the end, they will be very difficult to sort out and stuff like that. But in the end, if you know your history and really study it, you'll see things that will strike you as, wait a minute, why is that happening? Why is it that we're still fighting with the Confederate statue situation? Why are we still dealing with things that you thought would go away? With diversity at CBS, I really thought, I don't need to be here anymore. We got a black man in office, things are well. It's time for the sheriff to leave. No, things got even worse. So it's going to be an ongoing problem. And you have to, bring those issues up because you are Latino by designation. And being Norwegian doesn't take you away from being Latino. In fact, that's who Latinos are. We're hard to define because that's how we are as a people. And so you can't put us in a box and go, that's Latino. Just like you can't take a woman and go, that's a woman. They're all this way. That's what the whole stereotypes and misunderstandings are under, mislabeling. Yeah, that's my thought on that. Anyone else? Is it time to, you can truly ask me any question. I'm open to it.
Hi, I'm representing the Contra Costa Community College District. So I first of all want to recognize you for acknowledging you're going back or have gone back to Pierce College.
Yes.
So
I got 4.0.
All right.
So, but I'm taking algebra now, so that's probably going to change. I just want to warn you right now.
Curiosity, I'm assuming you make lots of presentations to many different audience, and I guess the audience that I'm in particularly interested in are the K-12, the younger generation. What are you hearing from them? Particularly, I would assume that your presentation is the same, or is it different?
No, it's different for every tell you the truth, it's different. I sense from the audience, like this is an audience I would not say certain jokes with, because it's more of an academic audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't do, I'll take material out that I think might be inappropriate or whatever. My wife sometimes joins me at these speeches, and I'll see her waving me off. Like she knows I'm gonna go with jokes. So I see that. So yeah, so K-12, younger audiences, you just need to engage them more. My kids are 9, 10, and 14, and each one's very different. But their a level of maturity with children nowadays is way more than I experienced. Like my son he goes to a great private school, and he said, I'm trying to learn about Sirius for the Persian emperor, and he's asking me questions. And I go, check your phone, Google. Looked up Google. Instantaneous. Remember the Dewey Decimal System? Go to a library, go through these 1,000 things, pull things out. It's in your the same power of what got us to the moon is in your phone. So for speaking to people that are younger, I look for different ways to relate to them and ways that they'll understand me. I can talk more about the hip hop culture. I can talk about In Living Color or Culture Clash. There's another show I wrote. Or Latino Logs on Broadway, directed by Cheech Marin. You know, I can talk about certain things they'll see. What I like to do is I have a show called Latino Thought Makers, where I go around the country with Edward James Olmos, Luis Guzman, all these different stars, and I interview them on stage because my simple idea of Latinos as a solution, not the problem, is showing Latinos in a positive way, because you have 8 hours of media that shows us in a bad way. And this is not just my example or my imagination. USC's Annenberg study, School of Communications, came out with a study that showed that Latinos are 0.3% of the characters in a study of over 900 films. 0.3%, or 17% of the population, 0.3. So what happens is people are allowed to talk about us. This is what the one thing I care to bring Latinos to see is, one, voting, and the second is education. Because if you don't vote, someone will vote for you, and it's not going to be at your best interest. And if you don't get educated, someone will use it against you. So education. So for me to go back to the community colleges, I actually went because I wanted to teach. I will get equivalency to teach at a community college this year, Kenyatta College. So I'll be at Kenyatta College. I'm going to teach a class. And the reason is I really feel it's important that Latinos are teaching, because people need to see this. The sad thing I experienced at Pierce, I took Chicano studies, right? 9 units of Chicano studies. Not a single Anglo kid or black kid in the entire class. To me, that's a waste. I study Western civilization. I'm better off for it. I need to study African-American history and things like that, because we're all part of a global world. So that's the one thing I noticed. But yeah, so I change it when I talk to, you know, you ever a difference between a community college or Harvard? You know, there's certain things they'll know, but I'm not saying either one's smarter. It's just a way to communicate someone. Using a way, my job as a communicator is to make someone understand my point. So communicate. And so I'm looking for ways to communicate with a kid. I've spoken to gang members. You know, people wonder, that happened. Me and Danny Trejo, we spoke at a prison together. Now imagine me and Danny Trejo, me in a suit, Danny Trejo speaking at prison. He actually asked for him to talk first. And I felt pretty comfortable about that. So I said, go ahead, Danny, talk. And you know what he said? He said, listen, blank, blank, blank. You know I've been to Pelican Bay. You know I've been in these prisons. This man never went to prison. That's who you celebrate. And I remember it was very encouraging. But I changed the speech to talk about the potential I saw in these prisoners and the people, to see the potential. Because what prejudice does, it takes away human potential. That's all, and that robs all of us. That's why I look at it, I go, that robs all of us, because we're taking away potential. If I'm looking at someone and saying they don't deserve this because they're black, I'm taking away that person's potential. I'm wasting millions of dollars that could be the person that invents, you know, the cure for cancer, or the woman that helps us get to the space program. That's why I look at it as that way. So if anything, the objective is to say to someone who's younger, to keep them active into the discussion, and also ask them to listen. Because you have to believe your audience is smarter than you think they are. And so I find that kids are super smart. Like my child is very smart. And so I don't talk down to him. I talk to him with a conversation. You know, don't patronize. So that's what I do talk to. At Pierce College, or I mean, Oxnard College, we had Latino thought makers that brought there from Jamila Moore. Dr. Jamila Moore is at, we just did Kenyatta College with Isai Morales. So I speak around the country. And a lot of times I like to bring someone else with me for one reason. It becomes a dialogue between us, and we're all friends. I've known Luis Guzman. He's been in my movie called Nothing Like the Holidays. Isai Morales, we screen test together for La Bamba. So we have actually pretty interesting stories among ourselves. But at the same time, you get to demystify Hollywood and say, Hollywood's just a job. There's nothing extraordinary about me at all. I tell people that. You know, because I hear that. I see the video and I hear all the, I'm like, wow, man, that guy sounds cool. I want to meet him. And it's all true, but I'm not extraordinary. I'm ordinary, but I have a Mexican work ethic. So I'll go back to school and I'll get 4.0 while I'm directing at CBS. And I'll keep doing that. I'm looking into going to a doctorate program, you know, because I want no reason for anyone to stop me from teaching. So that's what I'm driven. Academia is a different ballgame. Believe me, I've never run into a more, you know, more bureaucratic sometimes and different. I mean, they wouldn't give me equivalency because a professor in the graphics department wouldn't give me equivalency to teach drama. The guy, I'm at the #1 network in America for 13 years, and I can't teach at a community college a drama class because a graphics art person on a committee said no. That's when I get frustrated because Hollywood's a different world where, you know, we'll figure out a way to make something happen. Yes?
Okay, now, this question is kind of complicated, and it's going back to you saying that because you're a Mexican, you feel a responsibility. And you were speaking to the person who was a millionaire, and she felt a responsibility. I'm wondering, and you also mentioned the fact that your sister was darker than you. You know, that responsibility as a person of color, we kind of hold to kind of promote or advocate and even explain ourselves and our stories and the complexities of them. How much of that responsibility do you, and I know that you can't save the world, but do you personally hold? Like, yeah, it's a difficult thing to balance constantly.
Well, yeah, I know
that sense of responsibility, but
well,
as far as successful.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you have to look at it this way. I didn't wake up this morning and said, what Mexican thing can I do this morning? You know, I didn't go down. I was just in Atlanta. Guess what? I learned about grits and shrimp. It was like, you know, I saw the black experience because I was in Atlanta. It looked like everyone was black. I go to here, everyone's Asian. It's like you certain parts of the countries you go to, you go, wow, you see this. It's not that the responsibility, I think, is the responsibility I think all humans have to leave this planet a better place, to leave people better for knowing you, to leave something behind. That's an inherent responsibility I have as a human. But I feel it more sometimes as a Latino, is that in the end, we are given a responsibility. I'll tell you why. My son is he's Mexican, right? So I joke with him. And at school, they jokingly call him white privilege because he goes to a very ethnic school, extremely ethnic. Before he went to a private one, I put him in MLC, which is virtually almost all Latino, except for a few white kids, which I'm glad to see they're there because they're learning Spanish. And they jokingly call him white privilege. And it's like, why? Well, his godfather is Edward James Olmos. So Edward James Olmos, he goes to auditions, he gets roles, he has a father in the business. They're seeing white privilege. They're not realizing white privilege really comes from a Mexican guy, not that. So, but he asked me one day, he goes, so I'll tell you a quick story of what I learned about him. He said, we were seeing a movie, Cromwell, the same one that inspired me. And you know what he said to me? He said, where's the women? I said, what do you mean? He looked at Cromwell in the Parliament and he goes, where's the women? He says, there's no women there. He says, were women made back then? I said, what? I can remember you said that, but I said, yes, there were women back then. They just weren't in politics. They weren't in the Parliament. They weren't allowed. And he said, that's unfair. That's unfair. And that gave me great pride because I saw that and I said, he saw something that I didn't even see or notice, that something was wrong with that picture. So a lot of times what I've done in media in Hollywood is I go, this isn't a complete picture. You don't buy a colored television set with only 2 colors on it. That's what we have to show. So yeah, you have to balance it because you can't wake up in the morning and go, in the words of Martin Luther King and, you know, and all those things and part of the history, because in the end, you got to be a human. In the end, you know, I married an Anglo woman. Some people would go, well, you're supposed to marry a Mexican woman. You've lived this perfect Mexican life and a Mexican, it's like, no. 2 of my cousins are married to Cesar Chavez's daughters. I'm on the board of Field, which is an organization for farm workers. I didn't tell anyone that. When they were asking whether I was Chicano or not, I didn't bring up, hey, my relatives, there's pictures of me with Caesar. None of that, because it's too much work. In the end, you have to accept who you are. So that's kind of what I've done. It just happens to be that I want to tell my story, and I'm just as interested in as your story as my story, to tell you the truth. That's why I love having people for Latino thought makers. I learned things. Luis Guzman, humanitarian, didn't know that. Cheech Marin, brilliant art collector, brilliant man. He won Celebrity Jeopardy. I get to know people and get to talk to them, and then people get to know them too, and then they become your friends and your family as well. One thing about being Latino, you want to be Latino, you're in. You're in. You know, we don't judge. She told me she was Indian and Mexican. I didn't stop and go, no, how can it be? We have a plan. Great, you're in. And I said to her, wow, I bet the food must be great because a mixture of Indian and Mexican together. Wow. I was like, so do you see how we're accepting? Tend to be more of that. The old school tended to be a little bit, because they're coming out of a world of prejudice, of going, you know, hey, I'm this, and they need to exert it. But the new school, or who we are, really is more like, great, welcome. You know, Afro-Cubano, welcome. Cuban, welcome. That's the way we think. We're better together than apart.
So, a fun fact,
Yes.
the earlier Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Contra Costa president
Mhm.
was actually Asian.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And you know something, that's great. Like, we don't look at that and go, no one's doing a DNA test to check out your Latino-ness. It doesn't work. I'm in Chihuahua, Mexico. Guess what? There's a Taramui Indian, there's a Mennonite, and the best cheese in Mexico comes from Chihuahua. The Mennonites make great cheese. You ever hear mariachi, oompa, oompa, oompa sound? Comes from Germans in Chihuahua. You ever had a good Mexican beer? Germans. Mexican-American War? Irish. French brought us mariachis for marriage. So we're a cavalcade of a lot of different cultures and history. Anything else?
I don't know if we have any more questions. We'll probably have to be respectful of people's time.
Oh, sorry.
But I'm thrilled, and thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, but I do have two favors.
Yeah, thank
you. On your desk or on the tables are evaluations. If you would fill those out for me, please. They go in that blue box in the corner on top of the computers. And also, I'd like to, for anybody who's interested, there is an invitation to the 2017 Philanthropy Summit, which will be the next big event here on campus. Solomon Valletta is doing that. It's unleashing a culture of philanthropy in your nonprofit. And one of our former speakers from the Latino Speaker Series, Dr. Mata Perez, will be on that panel. And we're thrilled that you could join us today. So thank you so very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Oh, and go check out Latino Thought Makers on YouTube. There's some really cool clips. So subscribe to you, Latino Thought Makers. Thank you so much, everybody.
So wonderful.
Thank you.